The heavy brass seal struck the mahogany desk with a sound like a gunshot in a cathedral. It was not a polite tap. It was a declaration of war. The vintage notary stamp, worn smooth by 3 generations of black hands, left a perfect crimson impression on the legal document. The ink bled into the fibers of the paper, locking the truth into the physical world. Richard Sterling, regional manager of Apex Title and Escrow, stared at the red ink. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin the shade of old ash. His mouth opened, but the expensive cologne he wore could not mask the sudden, sour scent of his own panic. Evelyn Vance did not blink. She sat perfectly still in her manual wheelchair, her hands resting lightly on the metal push rims. She wore a faded thrift store blazer that smelled faintly of mothballs and rain. To the world, she was a nuisance, a liability, a woman who did not belong in a glass tower worth $400 million. But the paper on the desk did not care about her blazer. It did not care about her wheelchair. It only cared about the numbers. Evelyn picked up the cease and desist letter Richard had just signed. Her voice was quiet, steady, and utterly devoid of mercy. She read the final paragraph aloud. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Richard had tried to bury her. He had tried to use the law as a bludgeon. But in his arrogance he had just signed a confession. He had admitted in writing to the exact illegal fee structure he had been using to steal from vulnerable homebuyers. The silence in the office was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the central air conditioning and the distant, muffled traffic of the city 40 stories below. Evelyn folded the letter. She placed it inside her worn leather folder. She looked at Richard, her eyes dark and calm. She told him that the audit was over, and then the world rewound. 48 hours earlier, the penthouse was quiet. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a grid of glittering lights stretching toward the dark horizon. Evelyn sat at her custom-designed desk, the surface clear except for a single thick manila folder. She was 34 years old. Her hands, scarred from a childhood accident that took the use of her legs, traced the edge of the folder. Inside the folder was the acquisition agreement for Apex Title and Escrow. Vance Holdings had just purchased a controlling interest in the regional mortgage and title company. It was supposed to be a routine expansion, a way to streamline the closing process for first-time homebuyers in the metropolitan area. But Evelyn was not a routine investor. She was a forensic accountant by training and a survivor by necessity. She had spent the last 3 weeks reviewing the preliminary escrow ledgers. The numbers did not add up. There was a ghost in the machine, a phantom line item buried deep within the closing cost disclosures. They called it an administrative hold fee. It was a 3% charge applied to escrow accounts that remained open for more than 30 days. On paper, it looked like a standard penalty for delayed paperwork, but Evelyn had pulled the demographic data. The fee was not applied randomly. It was disproportionately applied to first-generation homebuyers, single mothers, and elderly clients who lacked the legal representation to fight the delay. The delays were not accidents. They were manufactured. Apex Title was intentionally holding up the paperwork, triggering the 30-day clock, and then siphoning the 3% fee into a shadow account controlled by the regional management. It was a quiet theft, a legal robbery. It was the kind of violence that did not leave bruises, but it left families bankrupt. It left people sleeping in their cars after the closing fell through. Evelyn closed her eyes. She remembered her own mother. She remembered the stack of past due notices on the kitchen table. She remembered the sound of the landlord's fist on the door. She remembered the feeling of powerlessness when the system was designed to extract every last cent from those who could least afford it. She opened her eyes. The grief was gone. In its place was a cold, hard geometry. She picked up her phone and dialed her chief legal counsel. She told him to halt the public announcement of the acquisition. She told him she was going to the regional headquarters tomorrow morning. He asked if she wanted the executive team notified. She said no. She wanted to see how the machine operated when it thought no one was watching. She hung up the phone. She transferred into her wheelchair and rolled to the closet. She pushed aside the rows of tailored suits and silk blouses. She reached into the back, into a wooden box that had belonged to her grandfather. Her grandfather had been a notary public in a neighborhood that the redlining maps had colored red. He had helped hundreds of black families buy their first homes. He had taught her that a signature was a sacred thing, that a document was a shield. She pulled out his vintage brass notary seal. It was heavy, cold, and solid. The handle was worn smooth by decades of use. The base featured the intricate interlocking pattern of the state seal. She placed the brass seal into her worn leather folder. Next, she selected her armor. Not the armor of wealth, but the armor of invisibility. She chose a faded, oversized blazer from a thrift store she frequented when she wanted to disappear. It smelled faintly of cedar and old dust. She paired it with a simple, unbranded blouse and flat shoes. She rolled to the garage. She bypassed the sleek black town car. She walked to the adaptive van. She transferred into her manual wheelchair. It was a standard, lightweight model, scuffed at the edges, devoid of any custom carbon fiber upgrades. She was no longer Evelyn Vance, majority shareholder of a $400 million holding company. She was just a woman in a wheelchair, wearing a thrift store coat, carrying a leather folder. She was a ghost, and ghosts, she knew, were the only ones who could walk through walls. The glass tower of Apex Title and Escrow rose 40 stories into the gray morning sky. The facade was a mirror, reflecting the clouds and the smog, daring the city to look at itself. Evelyn approached the building from the street level. The main entrance was a grand staircase of polished white marble, flanked by heavy brass planters. There was no ramp. She pushed her wheelchair to the side, navigating the uneven pavement until she found the secondary entrance. It was tucked around the corner, near the loading dock. The air here smelled of diesel exhaust and damp cardboard. The accessible door was propped open with a fastened block. The automatic button was cracked, the plastic hanging loose. She pressed the button. Nothing happened. She waited. The wind bit at her cheeks. She pressed it again. The motor groaned, and the heavy glass doors slid open just enough for her to slip through. She entered the service corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly, pale green light on the linoleum floor. She navigated the narrow hallway, past the humming water heater and the stacked boxes of copy paper, until she reached the freight elevator. She rode it up to the 14th floor. The doors opened, and she stepped out into the client lobby of Apex Title and Escrow. The contrast was violent. The lobby was a cathedral of late-stage capitalism. The floors were heated Italian marble. The walls were clad in dark walnut. The air was climate-controlled, smelling of expensive espresso and subtle white tea. Soft, ambient jazz played from hidden speakers. Evelyn rolled forward. The wheels of her chair made a soft, rhythmic sound on the marble. She approached the front desk. It was a massive slab of backlit onyx. Behind it stood 3 receptionists. They were young, impeccably dressed, their posture rigid. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the onyx slab. She looked up. The desk was high, designed to make the person standing on the other side feel small. For a person in a wheelchair, it was a wall. She cleared her throat. She asked to speak with the escrow officer handling the Vance file. The receptionist on the left, a young woman with a tight bun and a name tag that read Chloe, looked up. Chloe's eyes flicked to the faded blazer, then to the wheelchair, then to the worn leather folder. Chloe's expression softened, just a fraction. There was a flicker of pity, or perhaps just basic human empathy in her eyes. Chloe asked for the file number. Evelyn slid a piece of paper across the onyx slab. It was a fake inquiry number she had generated, tied to a shell identity. Chloe typed the number into her terminal. Her fingers paused. She frowned. She typed it again. Chloe looked up, her voice dropping to a whisper. She said the file was flagged. She said it required regional manager approval to access the physical ledger. Before Evelyn could respond, a shadow fell over the desk. Richard Sterling stepped out from the glass-walled office behind the reception area. Richard was in his late 40s. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars. His hair was silver, styled with geometric precision. His cufflinks were gold. He carried himself with the effortless arrogance of a man who had never been told no. He did not look at Evelyn. He looked at Chloe. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly cold. He asked Chloe why she was speaking to a solicitor in the middle of the lobby. Chloe stammered. She said the woman had a file number. Richard finally looked down at Evelyn. His eyes were flat like 2 pieces of polished obsidian. He did not see a client. He did not see a human being. He saw a disruption. He saw a smudge on his pristine floor. He smiled. It was a terrible, thin smile. He told Evelyn that the client lounge was on the 15th floor. He told her that the 14th floor was for authorized personnel and active escrow clients only. Evelyn kept her voice level. She told him she was an active client. She told him she needed to review the physical ledger before signing the closing documents. Richard chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. He told her that all documents were available via the secure online portal. He told her that physical ledgers were archived off-site for security purposes. Evelyn reached into her leather folder. She pulled out a printed email. She slid it across the onyx slab. She told him that her email from his office, dated 3 days ago, explicitly stated that the physical ledger was available for review upon request between the hours of 9 and 5. Richard did not touch the paper. He looked at it as if it were contaminated. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the onyx slab. He lowered his voice, ensuring that the other receptionists could not hear, but ensuring that Evelyn felt the full weight of his authority. He told her that emails were generated by automated systems. He told her that systems glitched. He told her that he was the regional manager, and his word was the only policy that mattered in this building. He paused. His eyes drifted to the scuffed wheels of her chair. He told her that if she was having trouble navigating the online portal, he could have security escort her to the public library down the street. They had computers there. They had volunteers who could help people with her specific challenges. The insult was precise. It was surgical. He was not just denying her access. He was erasing her competence. He was reducing her to a stereotype, a helpless victim who needed to be managed, contained, and removed. Evelyn did not flinch. Her face was a mask of calm stone. She asked for his name. Richard straightened up. He adjusted his gold cufflinks. He told her that his name was Richard Sterling. He told her that if she did not leave the lobby within 3 minutes, he would have her trespassed for loitering. Evelyn looked at him. She memorized the exact cut of his suit. She memorized the brand of his cologne. She memorized the smug, untouchable certainty in his eyes. She reached into her folder. She pulled out a small digital voice recorder. She placed it on the onyx slab. She told him that she was not leaving. She told him that she was going to sit right here in the lobby and wait for the compliance officer. Richard's smile vanished. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stepped out from behind the desk. He walked around the onyx slab, invading her personal space. He towered over her wheelchair. He told her that she was making a very big mistake. He told her that people who tried to play games with Apex title usually found themselves on the wrong side of a very expensive lawsuit. He turned to Chloe. He ordered her to call building security. He told them to remove the Vagrant. Richard Sterling's face was a mask of triumphant rage. He held the phone to his ear, barking orders at the front desk dispatcher. He told them to send Miller up immediately. He told them to bring handcuffs. Evelyn sat perfectly still. The wheels of her manual wheelchair were locked. Her hands rested lightly on the metal push rims. She did not look at the phone. She looked at the onyx slab, watching the condensation from a chilled water pitcher bead and slide down the dark stone. She looked at Chloe. The young receptionist was trembling, her hand hovering over her keyboard. Evelyn spoke, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz and Richard's shouting. She told Chloe to put her hands away from the phone. She told her that calling security on a client requesting her own financial records was a violation of federal consumer protection laws. Richard slammed his hand on the onyx slab. The sound cracked like a whip in the high-ceilinged lobby. He told Evelyn that she was not a client. He told her she was a trespasser. He told her she was a vagrant who had wandered in off the street to harass his staff and shake down a legitimate business. He leaned over the desk. The expensive cologne rolled off him in waves, sour and cloying, masking the faint smell of his own adrenaline. He told her that he knew her type. He told her she thought she could come in here, play the victim, and extort a quick payout. Evelyn did not blink. She did not raise her voice. She told him that his assumptions were noted. She told him that they would be entered into the official record. Richard laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound that echoed off the walnut walls. He told her there was no record. He told her that he controlled the record. The elevator doors chimed, a soft, polite ding that felt entirely out of place in the tense air. Miller stepped out. The large security guard looked uncomfortable. He held his radio in one hand, his belt heavy with keys and a flashlight. He walked over to Richard, his heavy boots squeaking faintly on the polished marble. Richard pointed a manicured finger at Evelyn. He told Miller to arrest the woman. He told Miller she was trespassing, harassing staff, and attempting to steal confidential corporate files. Miller looked at Evelyn. He looked at the faded thrift store blazer. He looked at the scuffed wheels of the chair. He reached for his handcuffs. Evelyn did not flinch. She looked up at Miller. Her voice was calm, carrying the absolute weight of a woman who had read every law in the state. She asked Miller if he was aware that the lobby was a place of public accommodation. She asked him if he was aware that denying access to a disabled person and retaliating against them for requesting financial disclosures was a Class 2 misdemeanor. Miller stopped. His hand hovered over his belt. He looked at Richard. Richard's face flushed purple. He screamed at Miller to do his job. He told Miller that if he did not remove the vagrant immediately, he would fire him and sue the security company into bankruptcy. Miller swallowed hard. He looked back at Evelyn, his eyes pleading for an out. Before he could make a choice, a voice spoke from the side. Chloe. The young receptionist had stepped out from behind the onyx slab. She held a paper cup of water. She walked past Richard. She walked past Miller. She knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with Evelyn's wheelchair. She offered the cup of water to Evelyn. Her voice shook, but her eyes were fierce. She told Evelyn that she was sorry. She told her that the physical ledgers were actually in the back room, not off-site. She told her that Richard had lied to keep the shadow accounts hidden. Richard exploded. He stepped around the desk. He snatched the paper cup from Chloe's hand and threw it on the marble floor. The water splashed across the pristine stone, soaking into the hem of Chloe's skirt. He screamed at Chloe. He told her she was fired. He told her to get out of the building before he had Miller drag her out by her hair. Chloe stood up. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She looked at Richard. She told him that he could not fire her. She told him that she was the only one who knew how to use the legacy filing system, and if he fired her, he would never find the missing escrow funds. Richard froze. The mention of the missing funds hung in the air like a live wire. His eyes narrowed. He looked at Chloe with a new, dangerous intensity. He stepped close to her, lowering his voice to a lethal whisper. He told her that she had just made a very big mistake. He told her that she would never work in this city again. He told her that he would make sure her name was blacklisted from every title company in the state. Chloe's hands trembled, but she held her ground. Evelyn watched this. She saw the exact moment the gatekeeper's mask slipped, revealing the rot underneath. If you believe a person's dignity isn't determined by the fabric of their coat, leave a like so the algorithm knows this story matters. Richard turned back to Miller. The moment of hesitation was gone, replaced by cold, calculated malice. He told Miller to arrest them both. He told Miller they were conspiring to commit corporate espionage. Miller looked at the two women. He looked at the spilled water on the marble floor. He looked at Richard's red, sweating face. Miller slowly unclipped his radio. He keyed the mic. He called the precinct. He requested 2 officers for a trespassing and theft in progress at the Apex Title Building. Richard smiled. It was a terrible, thin smile. He had won. He had used the ultimate weapon, the police. He turned to Evelyn. He leaned down, invading her personal space. He whispered that he was going to ruin her. He told her that once she was in the system, she would never get out. He told her that no background check would ever clear her. She would never rent an apartment, never get a loan, never hold a job. He told her that she had chosen to play the victim, and now she would live it. Evelyn looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, calm, and utterly final. She told him that the system was only a weapon if you did not know how to read the manual. Most people scroll past when the system gets ugly. But you're still here. That says something about you. Subscribe if you agree. The police arrived 3 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stepped out of the elevator. They looked tired, their uniforms crisp but worn at the edges. Richard immediately rushed forward. He pointed at Evelyn and Chloe. He told the officers that these 2 women were trespassing, harassing staff, and attempting to access confidential client files. He told the officers to arrest them immediately. The female officer held up a hand. She told Richard to step back. She told him they needed to take statements from all parties. She walked over to Evelyn. She looked at the wheelchair, the faded blazer, the worn leather folder. She asked Evelyn for her identification. Evelyn reached into her folder. Richard watched her, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He expected her to pull out a fake ID, or nothing at all. He expected the satisfaction of watching her get handcuffed, but Evelyn did not pull out a driver's license. She pulled out a stack of certified mail receipts. She pulled out a printed email chain with timestamps. She pulled out the physical escrow ledger that Chloe had slipped to her. She placed them on the small table next to her wheelchair. She looked at the female officer. She told the officers that she was not trespassing. She told her that she was a client conducting a legally mandated audit of her own financial records. Richard interrupted. He screamed that it was all fake. He told the officers that she was delusional, that she had stolen those documents from his desk. The male officer stepped forward. He told Richard to be quiet. He looked at Evelyn. He asked her to explain the documents. Evelyn pointed to the certified mail receipts. She told the officer that she had sent 3 separate requests for the physical ledger via certified mail, all signed for by Richard Sterling's office. She pointed to the email chain. She told the officer that Richard had explicitly denied the requests, citing a fake company policy. She pointed to the ledger. She told the officer that this was the actual physical ledger, which she had retrieved from the back room with the help of the employee Richard had just illegally terminated. Richard's face was pale. He looked at Chloe. He looked at the ledger. He realized with a sudden, sickening jolt that the ledger was open to page 42, the page that detailed the shadow accounts. He lunged forward. He tried to grab the ledger. The male officer stepped in his path. He put a hand on Richard's chest and pushed him back. He told Richard to step away from the evidence. Richard stumbled. He looked at the officers. He looked at Evelyn. He realized that the trap he had set was closing around his own neck. Richard's mind raced. He was a man who controlled narratives. He controlled ledgers. He controlled people. He took a deep breath. He smoothed his suit jacket. He put on his best corporate smile. He looked at the female officer. He told her that this was all a misunderstanding. He told her that the woman in the wheelchair was a disgruntled former employee who had been fired for embezzlement. He told her that the documents were stolen. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a heavy gold compliance badge. He told the officers that he was the regional director of compliance for Apex Title. He told them that he had the authority to classify this as an internal corporate matter. He told them that if they would just take the woman into custody for theft, he would press charges quietly. No media, no public record, just a simple booking. The female officer looked at the gold badge. She looked at Richard, then she looked at Evelyn. She asked Evelyn if she had anything to say. Evelyn did not look at the badge. She did not look at Richard. She looked at the security camera mounted in the corner of the lobby. The red light was blinking steadily. She told the officer that she did not need to say anything. She told the officer that the camera had been recording the entire time. She told the officer that she had already forwarded the live feed to the corporate security server of Vance Holdings. Richard froze. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin the shade of old ash. He whispered her name. He asked her what she just said. Evelyn looked at him. Her eyes were dark, calm, and utterly final. She told him that Vance Holdings had acquired Apex Title and escrow 48 hours ago. She told him that she was Evelyn Vance. She told him that she was the majority shareholder. The female officer looked at her mobile terminal. She typed in the name. She looked up, her expression shifting from routine boredom to absolute shock. Before she could speak, the elevator doors chimed. What walks out of those elevator doors next will change everything. Don't leave now. The elevator doors chimed again. It was the same soft, polite ding that had announced the police officers. But this time, the sound did not feel like a routine arrival. It felt like a verdict. The doors slid open. 3 people stepped out onto the pristine Italian marble. The first was Marcus, the head of global security for Vance Holdings. He was a massive man, built like a bank vault, wearing a tailored suit that strained against his shoulders. His face was a mask of professional calm. The second was David, the senior partner of Vance Holdings Legal. He held a sleek tablet in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. His glasses caught the light of the chandelier, hiding his eyes. The third was Sarah, the lead forensic auditor. She carried a heavy lockable briefcase and a stack of manila folders. She did not look at the lobby. She did not look at the police. Her eyes locked instantly onto Evelyn. They did not walk toward Richard Sterling. They walked straight past him, as if he were a piece of misplaced furniture, and stopped exactly 2 feet from Evelyn's wheelchair. Marcus bowed his head, just a fraction. The gesture was small, but in the context of the room, it was seismic. He spoke, his voice a deep, quiet rumble that carried to every corner of the lobby. He told Evelyn that the perimeter was secure. He told her that the live feed from the lobby cameras had been routed to the executive floor 40 minutes ago. He told her that the board was watching. Richard Sterling's brain short-circuited. The cognitive dissonance was too violent to process. The woman in the thrift store blazer, the woman he had tried to have arrested, the woman he had called a vagrant, was being addressed by the head of global security. Richard lunged forward. His face was purple, the veins in his neck bulging against his starched collar. He screamed at Marcus. He told Marcus that this was a mistake. He told him that these people were imposters. He ordered Marcus to arrest Evelyn immediately. Marcus did not even turn his head. He simply raised one massive hand, palm out, without looking at Richard. The gesture was so absolute, so devoid of respect, that Richard actually stumbled backward. Marcus looked back at Evelyn. He told her that Mr. Sterling's corporate credentials had been suspended as of 9:14 in the morning. He told her that Richard no longer had access to this floor, these systems, or these employees. Richard's breath came in ragged, wet gasps. The expensive cologne was entirely gone now, replaced by the sharp, sour stench of pure terror. He looked at the table next to Evelyn's wheelchair, the physical ledger, the certified mail receipts, the email chains, the evidence. Panic overrode his sanity. If the ledger left this room, he was dead, not legally dead, financially dead. The shadow accounts would be found, the 3% fees would be traced, the embezzlement would be undeniable. Richard dropped to his knees and lunged for the table. He grabbed the physical ledger. He screamed that it was company property. He screamed that he was destroying unauthorized documents. He raised his hands to tear the pages out. He never got the chance. Miller, the lobby security guard who had hesitated earlier, moved with sudden, explosive speed. He tackled Richard from the side. The 2 men crashed into the dark walnut wall. The sound of tearing fabric echoed through the lobby as Richard's bespoke suit jacket ripped at the shoulder. Marcus stepped forward calmly. He grabbed Richard's arms, twisting them behind his back with practiced, effortless efficiency. He forced Richard's face into the marble floor. Richard thrashed. He kicked his legs, his expensive leather shoes squeaking violently against the stone. He turned his head, his eyes wild, spit flying from his lips. He looked past Marcus. He looked at Chloe. Chloe was pressed against the onyx slab, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Richard screamed at her. He told her she did this. He told her she was an accessory to corporate theft. He told her he would sue her into the ground. He told her she would never work in this city again. He tried to kick his leg out toward her, a final, pathetic attempt to inflict pain. David, the senior legal partner, stepped smoothly between Richard and Chloe. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He looked at Richard with the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. David told Richard that Miss Chloe was now under the direct protection of Vance Holdings Legal. He told him that any further threats, physical or verbal, would be prosecuted as aggravated assault and witness tampering. He told Richard that his legal team would be in touch. The female police officer stepped forward. She pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. The metal clicked loudly in the quiet lobby. She grabbed Richard's wrists, pulling them tight behind his back, and locked the cuffs in place. She hauled him to his feet. Richard was no longer a regional manager. He was a suspect. He was sweating profusely, his silver hair plastered to his forehead, his gold cufflinks dangling from the torn fabric of his sleeves. The police officers read him his rights. The words were flat, routine, and utterly devastating. We are the people who stand up when the gatekeeper tries to close the door. If you believe kindness is not a weakness, subscribe to this channel. Richard was pushed toward the freight elevator. He was hyperventilating. The reality of his situation was finally crushing him. The power he had wielded so casually, the arrogance he had worn like armor, had evaporated. He looked back at Evelyn. She had not moved. She sat perfectly still in her manual wheelchair. Her hands rested lightly on the metal push rims. Her face was a mask of calm stone. Richard's eyes darted from her wheelchair, to her faded blazer, to the worn leather folder, to the heavy brass notary seal resting on top of the files. The pieces finally locked together in his brain. The thrift store coat was not poverty. It was a disguise. The manual wheelchair was not a weakness. It was a choice. The brass seal was not a relic. It was a weapon. He was looking at Evelyn Vance, the majority shareholder, the forensic accountant, the woman who owned the building, the company, and his career. Richard's knees gave out. The police officers had to hold him up. He began to cry, ugly, sniveling tears that mixed with the sweat on his face. The arrogant gatekeeper was gone. In his place was a small, pathetic man begging for his life. He stammered. He told Evelyn it was a misunderstanding. He told her it was a stress test. He told her they were testing the new security protocols for the acquisition. He told her he was just following the simulation. He begged her to believe him. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Even the ambient jazz seemed to have stopped playing. Evelyn looked down at him. Her eyes were dark, calm, and utterly final. She reached into her leather folder. She pulled out the cease and desist letter he had forced her to sign. The letter with the red notary stamp. The letter that contained his exact confession. She held it up. The heavy bond paper caught the light. She told him that he had sent this to her. She told him that he had cited the 3% administrative hold fee. She told him that he had cited the shadow routing numbers. She told him that he had put it in writing, on corporate letterhead, and asked her to notarize his confession. She folded the paper neatly and placed it back in the folder. She pushed her wheels forward. The rubber tires rolled silently over the marble. She stopped exactly 2 feet from his face. She looked up at him. Her voice was quiet, steady, and devoid of any mercy. She told him that he thought her wheelchair made her invisible. She told him that he thought her coat made her poor. She told him that he thought because she did not look like him, she did not have the power to break him. She paused. She let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his own arrogance crush him. Then, she delivered the words that would end his career. She told him that he did not need to know who she was to treat a human being with dignity. She told him that he just needed to be decent. Richard broke completely. He sobbed into his hands. He begged for his mortgage. He begged for his kids. He promised to pay the money back, all of it. Evelyn did not blink. She looked at Marcus. She told Marcus to escort Mr. Sterling off the premises. She told him to confiscate his keys, his badge, and his company phone. She told him to ensure Richard never set foot on Vance Holdings' property again. She looked at David. She told David to pull every single file Richard Sterling had touched in the last 36 months. She told him to audit every closing cost, every escrow account, every shadow fee. She told him to find every single family that had been bled dry by the administrative hold fee. She told him that they were going to correct the ledger. All of it. David nodded. He tapped his tablet. He told her that the audit protocols were already active. He told her that the forensic team was already in the server room. The police officers pushed Richard toward the freight elevator. They shoved him inside. The heavy metal doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of his sobbing. The lobby was quiet again. She didn't ask for his apology. She asked for the record to be corrected. If you respect that, like this video. Evelyn sat in the quiet lobby. The crisis was over. The villain was gone. But the work was just beginning. Most people would have taken the apology and walked away. But Evelyn wasn't done. What happens next will show you why one small document can change a whole system. Don't leave now. The elevator doors closed, sealing Richard Sterling inside with the 2 police officers. The soft hum of the descending car was the only sound left on the 14th floor. The lobby of Apex Title and Escrow was no longer a cathedral of late-stage capitalism. It was a crime scene, and Evelyn Vance was the lead investigator. Marcus, the head of global security, stood by the freight elevator, his arms crossed, ensuring no one else entered the floor. David, the senior legal partner, was already on his phone, his voice a low, steady murmur as he instructed the external legal team to prepare emergency injunctions. But it was Sarah, the lead forensic auditor, who walked straight to the massive mahogany desk in Richard's office. She did not look at the spilled water on the marble. She did not look at the torn fabric of Richard's suit jacket left on the floor. She looked only at the physical ledger Evelyn had placed on the table. Sarah opened her heavy, lockable briefcase. She pulled out a high-resolution document scanner, an encrypted external hard drive, and a set of white cotton gloves. She put the gloves on. The snap of the cotton against her skin was sharp in the quiet room. She looked at Evelyn. She asked for permission to begin the extraction. Evelyn nodded. She told Sarah to start with page 42. She told her to pull the metadata from every digital file Richard had accessed in the last 36 months. She told her to cross-reference the physical escrow ledgers with the shadow routing numbers listed in the cease and desist letter. Sarah went to work. The rhythmic whir of the scanner filled the office. It was a mechanical, relentless sound. It was the sound of a machine eating lies. Evelyn rolled her wheelchair into the office. She positioned herself beside Sarah. She watched the digital images of the ledger pages appear on the high-resolution monitor. Page 42. The account of the single mother in the South District. The $800 administrative hold fee. The routing number leading to an offshore shell company registered to Richard's brother-in-law. Sarah clicked on the digital version of the same file. She opened the version history. The screen populated with a list of timestamps and user IDs. Sarah pointed to the screen. She told Evelyn that the digital file had been manually altered. The original entry, dated 3 months ago, showed a zero balance for the hold fee. But at 2:14 in the morning on a Sunday, a user with the ID R Sterling admin had opened the file. The user had manually inputted the $800 fee. The system had automatically generated a shadow routing number to balance the ledger. Evelyn stared at the screen. The blue light reflected in her dark, calm eyes. She told Sarah to export that metadata. She told her to print it, timestamp it, and attach it to the physical ledger. This was the boomerang. Richard had tried to use the digital system to hide his theft. But the digital system was designed to track changes. His arrogance had led him to believe he could overwrite history. He had forgotten that every keystroke leaves a ghost. The metadata was the ghost, and it was pointing directly at him. David walked into the office. He held a thick manila folder. He looked at Evelyn. He told her that the external legal team had drafted the termination papers. He told her that they had also drafted a civil restitution order. He told her that Richard's personal assets, including his primary residence and his investment accounts, were being frozen pending a full forensic accounting of his personal finances. Evelyn took the folder. She looked at the documents. They were dense, filled with legal jargon and statutory citations. They were beautiful. They were the architecture of accountability. She told David to bring Richard back up. David raised an eyebrow. He asked if she was sure. He told her that Richard was currently in the back of a police cruiser, being processed for trespassing and assault. Evelyn shook her head. She told David to call the precinct. She told them to invoke the corporate fraud clause. She told them that Richard was not a trespasser. He was a suspect in an internal embezzlement scheme, and Vance Holdings required him to be brought back to the 14th floor to sign his termination and restitution agreements before he was booked into the county jail. David made the call. 20 minutes later, the freight elevator doors opened. The police officers escorted Richard back onto the 14th floor. He looked different. The arrogant gatekeeper was gone. His silver hair was disheveled. His face was pale and slick with sweat. His hands were cuffed behind his back. The expensive cologne had been entirely replaced by the sour, metallic smell of fear. They led him into his own office. They made him stand in front of the mahogany desk. David handed him a pen. He told Richard to sign the termination agreement. He told him to sign the civil restitution order. He told him that if he refused, the district attorney would be notified immediately, and the civil fraud charges would be elevated to criminal racketeering. Richard's hands shook so badly, he could barely hold the pen. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the woman in the wheelchair. He looked at the brass notary seal resting on the leather folder. He whispered that he would pay it back. He said he could liquidate his retirement fund. He said he could sell his house. Evelyn looked at him. Her voice was quiet, steady, and utterly devoid of mercy. She told him that his retirement fund was already frozen. She told him that his house was already leveraged. She told him that the shadow account had already been drained by his brother-in-law, who was currently on a flight to a non-extradition country. She told him that he was not signing these papers to save his money. He was signing them to save his freedom. Richard broke. He dropped the pen. He sobbed, a wretched, ugly sound, and signed his name on the dotted line. He signed away his career. He signed away his reputation. He signed away the last remnants of his power. David collected the papers. He nodded to the police officers. They took Richard by the arms and led him out of the office, down the hall, and into the freight elevator. The doors closed. The hum of the motor faded. The office was quiet. Sarah closed the laptop. She looked at Evelyn. She told her that the audit was complete. She told her that the total amount embezzled through the administrative hold fee was just over $4.2 million. She told her that it had been extracted from 112 vulnerable homebuyers. Evelyn closed her eyes. She thought about the single mother in the South District. She thought about the $800 that could have bought groceries for a month. She thought about the elderly couple who had lost their closing because of a fake delay. She opened her eyes. The grief was there, but it was hardened into a cold, sharp resolve. She told David to draft the refund letters. She told him that every single victim was going to get their money back. She told him that the letters were to be sent via certified mail, with a formal apology on Vance Holdings' letterhead, explicitly stating that the error was caused by regional management fraud. She told him to begin the process immediately. She didn't ask for his apology. She asked for the record to be corrected. If you respect that, like this video. The physical transformation of Apex title and escrow took exactly 41 days. Evelyn did not just fire Richard Sterling. She dismantled the architecture of his power. She understood that a bad actor was not just a person. A bad actor was a symptom of a building that allowed them to thrive. If you remove the person but leave the building the same, the rot will simply grow back. The construction crews arrived on a Tuesday morning. They did not work in secret. They worked in plain sight, tearing down the physical barriers that Richard had used to enforce his gatekeeping. The first thing to go was the massive slab of backlit onyx at the front desk. It had been designed to make people feel small. It had been designed to force a person in a wheelchair to look up at a wall of stone. The workers took it apart piece by piece. The heavy, dark stone was loaded onto a truck and hauled away. In its place, they installed a new reception desk. It was made of warm, light oak. It had 2 levels. The upper level was for standing clients. The lower level was specifically designed for seated visitors. The lower wing was cut at an angle, allowing a person in a wheelchair to roll right up to the edge and look the receptionist directly in the eye. There was no stone wall. There was no physical barrier. There was only a flat, open surface where business could be conducted as equals. Next, they addressed the entrance. The grand marble staircase at the front of the building remained, but it was no longer the only way in. The secondary entrance, the one hidden near the loading dock that smelled of diesel and damp cardboard, was permanently sealed. Instead, the main entrance was retrofitted. The heavy brass planters were moved. A wide, gently sloping ramp was integrated into the architecture of the facade. It was not an afterthought. It was not a metal plank bolted to the side. It was poured concrete, heated from beneath to melt snow in the winter, flanked by glass balustrades that caught the morning light. It was beautiful. It was accessible. It was a statement that everyone who walked through those doors was expected to be there. Inside, the glass-walled office that Richard had used to hide his embezzlement was converted into a transparent compliance center. The walls were frosted glass, allowing light to pass through, but maintaining privacy for client discussions. It was a physical manifestation of transparency. On the 42nd day, Evelyn Vance returned to the building. She did not wear the faded thrift store blazer. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that fit perfectly over her frame. She did not need the disguise anymore. The audit was complete. The refunds had been issued. The civil restitution order had been executed. Richard Sterling was currently facing a federal indictment for wire fraud. His assets liquidated to pay back the 112 families he had bled dry. Evelyn rolled up the new concrete ramp. The morning sun was warm on her face. She reached the top and pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby was different. The air did not smell of expensive espresso and subtle white tea designed to mask the scent of greed. It smelled fresh paint and clean wood. The ambient jazz was gone, replaced by the quiet, respectful murmur of people conducting their business. She rolled toward the new oak desk. Chloe was standing behind it. Chloe looked different, too. The tight, anxious bun was gone, replaced by a loose, natural style. She wore a simple professional blouse. Her posture was relaxed. She was not trembling. She was not looking over her shoulder. When Chloe saw Evelyn, her face broke into a wide, genuine smile. She stepped out from behind the desk. She did not look down at the wheelchair. She looked directly into Evelyn's eyes. Chloe welcomed her back. She told her that the morning ledger was balanced. She told her that the new compliance protocols were functioning perfectly. Evelyn smiled back. She told Chloe that she was not just the receptionist anymore. She pulled a folded document from her leather folder. She handed it to Chloe. Chloe opened it. Her eyes widened. It was an employment contract. The title read, Regional Director of Compliance and Client Advocacy. Evelyn told her that the board had voted unanimously. She told her that Chloe had proven she understood the ethical mandate of the company. She told her that her first job was to oversee the new training program for all client-facing employees. Chloe looked up, tears welling in her eyes. She whispered that she did not know what to say. Evelyn told her to say thank you by doing the work. She told her that the cost of basic respect is $0, but the cost of maintaining it is a lifetime of vigilance. Chloe nodded. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped back behind the desk. She sat down in the new, lower chair. She looked at Evelyn eye to eye across the flat surface of the oak. It was perfect. Most people scroll past when the system gets ugly. But you are still here. That says something about you. Subscribe if you agree. 6 months later. The morning light streamed through the glass balustrades of the new ramp, casting long golden shadows across the lobby floor. Evelyn sat in the compliance center. The frosted glass walls glowed softly in the sun. On her desk there were no stacks of past due notices. There were no shadow ledgers. There were no cease and desist letters. There was only a single thick manila folder, and resting on top of the folder, catching the light, was her grandfather's vintage brass notary seal. It was no longer a weapon. It was a paperweight. It was a reminder. The door to the compliance center opened. Chloe walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down in front of Evelyn. Chloe told her that the final batch of refund checks had cleared the bank. She told her that all 112 accounts were fully reconciled. She told her that the state attorney general had officially closed the investigation, citing the voluntary restitution and the new compliance protocols. Evelyn took a sip of the coffee. It was warm, bitter, and perfect. She told Chloe to file the final reconciliation report. She told her to lock the physical ledgers in the vault. Chloe nodded. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. She looked back at Evelyn. She asked if Evelyn was going to keep the office, or if she was going back to the penthouse. Evelyn looked at the brass seal. She ran her scarred fingers over the smooth, worn handle. She told Chloe she was keeping the office. She told her that the penthouse was too quiet. She said she preferred the sound of the lobby. She said she preferred the sound of the work. Chloe smiled. She told her she would see her at the board meeting on Thursday. The door closed. The room was quiet. Evelyn pulled a blank piece of heavy bond paper from her drawer. She placed it flat on the desk. She picked up the brass seal. She pressed it into the ink pad. She did not stamp a confession. She did not stamp a threat. She stamped the bottom of the blank page. A perfect crimson impression. The ink bled into the fibers of the paper, locking the truth into the physical world. It was a clean page, a corrected record, a foundation for whatever came next. She set the seal down. She looked out through the frosted glass, watching the clients moving through the lobby. She watched a young mother in a wheelchair roll up to the lower wing of the oak desk. She watched the receptionist lean forward, making eye contact, handing over a document with a respectful nod. There was no friction. There was no gatekeeping. There was only the quiet, steady rhythm of a system working the way it was supposed to. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. She closed her eyes. She listened to the hum of the central air conditioning, the soft click of keyboards, the muffled, polite voices of the lobby. It was the sound of peace. Okay, real talk. I told you this story because I have watched people get sized up in 10 seconds their whole lives. The wheelchair, the old coat, the wrong everything. And the wildest part? The cost of basic respect is $0. Zero. You do not need a corner office to enforce dignity. You just need to refuse to let the gatekeeper lock the door. Be the Chloe. Always. Stand up when the room tells you to sit down, and if you are the one in the chair, keep your receipts. The paper trail never lies. If this story hit you somewhere, share it with someone who needs the reminder that power is just an illusion until someone checks the math. And subscribe, because we are just getting started.